We start today with a huge congratulations to MAGA and an attaboy to Donald Trump. What am I talking about? Well, Donald Trump didn't just light himself on fire politically in these first 100 days. He has managed to burn down the Canadian right wing as well. This actually does require some skill. You don't often see this. What happened is that after months of Trump threatening to annex Canada, launching a new trade war, treating Canadians like they were just the 51st state waiting to be taken over, Canadians have revolted. And what happened is that Canada's own little Trump knockoff, Pierre Poilievre, went from almost becoming the next prime minister to losing his own seat altogether. This is not just losing the election to be prime minister. This is losing his personal seat. Completely humiliating. And meanwhile, Mark Carney, who has only really been in the discussion for prime minister recently, rode this wave of anti-Trump backlash in Canada straight into the prime minister's office.
The Department of Interior just announced a new offshore drilling policy that will boost oil production in the Gulf of America by 100,000 barrels per day. On the deregulation front, President Trump is committed to cutting senseless red tape.
Yeah, so the part she left out was that it could increase oil production in the Gulf by 100,000 barrels a day within 10 years. That's the part she left out. I just. Now let's explain exactly what this order says. Now here you have a platform, drilling into this oil. Currently, offshore, you are allowed to tap into one oil-bearing reservoir and produce from it, okay? And what this order does is it allows companies to commingle. That means in places where there are multiple oil-producing reservoirs, they can produce from them simultaneously. Basically, it allows companies to produce from multiple reservoirs at the same time in the Gulf. Now, here is the difficulty and problems that come with producing from multiple reservoirs. You have a reservoir here, you have a reservoir down here. You could have a map here that has 6 different reservoirs. The issue is that those reservoirs have different reservoir pressures, or RPs. And what does that mean? That means this reservoir, may have 3,000 pounds of pressure. If there was another one right here, it may have 4. If there was one up here, it may have 2. The reservoir with the most pressure is the only one that's going to produce, unless you go in and isolate each reservoir individually. Trying to produce, and this is the concerning part, trying to produce from multiple reservoirs is something companies usually do in the late stage life of a well, right? They have an old well, the old reservoir is tapped out, so they go in and they try to tap into multiple reservoirs and try to restore the well to production. So most of this is going to be happening in very old wells. I'm sure the Trump administration was approached by somebody that works on old wells that needed to be able to do this, and that's why it's a thing now. We were allowed to start doing this on land many, many years ago. It didn't result in any production increases. It's not enough to matter. Even if they were able to gain 100,000 barrels a day of production over a 10-year period, that's more than we've lost in the last 3 months. It's not a huge thing. It's not a big thing. Now, the one regulation that was changed that could lead to a problem is he increased the maximum pressure on an offshore well from 200 psi to 1500 psi. So he increased the flow pressure on operating wells in the Gulf of Mexico by like over 700%. That means we would be seeing these pressures on older wells, on older pipe, on older equipment that is more likely to fail. Not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying the risk of that happened has been elevated significantly. Even if they are able to increase production at the rate they're saying, it's a drop in the bucket. You're talking about 100,000 barrels a day over the entire Gulf. There's nothing at all impressive about that, especially over a 10-year period. And here's the thing. People think this is going to happen tomorrow. That's not a thing. regardless, I'm less concerned about the oil production as I am raising the maximum pressure on these old wells. That is somewhat concerning. So, thanks.
Donald Trump's first 100 days of his second term are coming and going, and we have whooped his butt. He's been so busy terrorizing the immigrant community and getting stymied in the courts that he's gone back to indicting judges like he did in his first term, because he has failed to deliver in any measurable way. His first 100 days is a failure by any historical or modern metric. He has passed 5 pieces of legislation through a Congress in which he holds the majority of both houses. That is a historical low for a president in their first 100 days, going all the way back to World War II and maybe beyond that, but I got bored of looking. Of those 5 bills, one was a continuing resolution he only got through because Chuck Schumer let him. The other was the Laken Riley Act that was negotiated during Joe Biden's presidency. And 3 were just congressional review pieces of legislation to overturn some Biden-era regulations. He has done jack all legislatively. Reminder that I keep track of all of this legislation he's trying to push through in my Substack, link in bio. He has been sued 186 times in his first 100 days. So far, to compare, Biden was only sued about 50 and Obama was sued 30. Courts have issued 15 or more national injunctions, again, I got bored of looking, against the Trump administration in its first 100 days, more than Obama, Biden, and W. He promised to end the war in Ukraine on day 1. All he's managed to do is admit that Putin is stringing him along. His economic policy has been a complete and abject failure. He claims he's negotiated with 200 countries. There are only 195. No country has come out saying that he's made a deal with them. 0. Doge has walked back its claims about how much money it saved us to $160 billion. It's costing $135, and that is before the lawsuits. Democrats are overperforming in their special elections as a result and stopped him and Musk from being able to buy a Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. And all of that has culminated in him having the lowest 100-day approval rating in 80 years. And all of that happened because of y'all. Because we make calls, we make noise, we push back, we protest. Democrats make good goalies.
It seems like there's a lot of people on the left who are looking for enemies instead of allies, and we need to talk about it. I know we are living in times where there's a lot of shit going down, and it feels like anybody could be an enemy at any minute. Somebody could be a double agent of sorts. I guess what I'm trying to say is there seems to be a lot of paranoia on the left, and I get it. I kind of have it too. But this is one of those types of scenarios where we on the left look like we're always eating our own. It's almost like we'll hear somebody say something, and we're automatically on edge, so we're just like, wait a minute. Did they just say something that could have come across as something right-leaning? But there's a lot of people that act like if you're not 100% in my personal camp, then you are just as bad as the red hats. And if we have that type of attitude, we're always going to fail. I'll give you an example from one of my videos yesterday. I made a video about the whole Unfuck America tour and what is going on with it, because I would hate to see that the whole movement just kind of died because of one stupid mistake. But the way that I phrased it was, I would hate to see this movement die for no good reason. And I had somebody in my comments tag me multiple times saying, what did you mean by no good reason? Like trying to catch me in a trap. It's almost like they were trying to get me to say, racism isn't that big of a deal, guys. We need to truck on. But I thought that I clarified very well that just because one person does something bad in the movement does not mean that we need to abandon the whole movement. We just need to try and separate ourselves from that one person. That was my whole point. But there is a lot of people who do this. They're looking for those little word traps, and I know them well because my abusive mom used to live by them. Anything that I said, she could make it seem like I said something totally different. But the simple fact is, there are going to be those of us who say things in different ways than the way that you would have said them, and that's okay. And there are going to be people who don't think about situations in the exact same way that you think about them. And that is okay. Like, for instance, say somebody you know who's on the left says something along the lines of, I would never go to Venezuela. And automatically it sends off alarms in your head. And you're thinking, wait a minute, this person might be racist against Venezuelans. And maybe anybody from South America. Instead of jumping to the worst conclusion, Ask them to clarify what they meant. They could have gone there for vacation and had a horrible time and just never want to go back. They could have had a family member that died there, and that's what they think of when they think of that country. The thing is we don't know what's going on in their heads. But we on the left are very fine-tuned to think, wait a minute, is this racism? Is this a terrible person? Why have I been talking to this person all along? I could look like a racist by proxy. Then that person ends up ghosting them, talking to their friends and saying that person's a terrible racist without even knowing what's going on with them. We need to understand that these people are still our allies. We need to try and understand them instead of making them into enemies. And I've seen this attitude from time to time on the left, and I think I've even been guilty of it. And it needs to stop. From all of us.
Caroline Leavitt is the White House press secretary, and she held one of the most humiliating briefings I've ever seen. This was a so-called new media briefing, and the first topic that came up from these great new media journalists was about Uber drivers and truck drivers speaking English, which is a new area of concern for the White House.
Accessible presidency in American history. So with that, let's kick it off, and I'm happy to take your question first, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Caroline, both for having us and for granting me the first question here.
Sure.
And I can attest to the deportations in Florida. My Uber drivers finally speak English again, so thank you for that.
Understand what she's saying. Thanks to Trump deporting people, her Uber drivers now speak English. And this is Sean Spicer on the left who's chuckling about it.
My question for you is, what are the administration's plans for those who continue to defy the executive orders? Most notably, on my mind, are the ones related to what some would call trans men. I would call men masquerade as trans women, which are men masquerading as girls in girl sports.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All right, so the anti-trans question to kick things off, and let's now get to this issue of the driving. Caroline Leavitt bravely and courageously announcing a new initiative in which truckers will be able to speak English.
And then the third executive order, which actually speaks to the heart of your question earlier about the Uber drivers, will be a order directing the Department of Transportation to include English literacy tests for our truckers. This is a big problem in the trucking community that, unless you're in that community, you might not know. But there's a lot of communication problems between truckers on the road with federal officials and local officials as well, which obviously is a public safety risk. So we're going to ensure that our truckers, who are the backbone of our economy, are all able to speak English.
You know, there's a different discussion to be had here. First of all, in Tennessee, they looked at doing the exact same thing. To be a commercial driver, you've got to be able to speak English. That idea was killed because they recognized in Tennessee it would absolutely cripple the transportation industry. And of course, the idea that the party of small government is going to draft an unenforceable executive order designed to police people speaking certain languages is yet another one of these contrasts, and we say we are for small government, but really we're not.
President Trump, it will be to discuss the future economic and security relationship between two sovereign nations.
That was Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, talking smack about Donald Trump. Yeah, that's Canada's version of talking smack. They're so polite. And the American press angle on this is that Donald Trump's big mouth made Canada switch from initially voting conservative to voting for centrist Mark Carney, which is true. But there's something far more important. The devil, or in this case, the angel, is in the details. And the details are how remarkably strategic and disciplined Canadian voters were to make sure that Mark Carney, the anti-Trump candidate, would be elected prime minister. And they were strategic and disciplined in ways Americans have never been, but need to be, to defeat Trump and the GOP if there are fair elections in 2026, 2028. Canada has a center-left party to the left of the Democrats, the NDP. And prior to this election, they held 24 seats in the House of Commons. And what Canadians realized collectively was if we continue to vote them in, the Conservatives might take over. Mark Carney might lose. So they strategically abandoned the NDP and voted for the centrist Liberal Party candidate, Mark Carney. Completely abandoned the NDP. NDP hardly has any seats left. Sane Canadians united around a centrist candidate, Mark Carney, in order to defeat the threat of Trumpism. And in fact, the Liberal Party went centrist when it replaced Trudeau with Mark Carney. The Canadian left and center put aside their differences and united to defeat Trumpism, defeat the right wing. And guess what? The same thing happened in Poland to defeat their emerging dictatorship. A similar thing happened in France, similar in Spain. But in the United States, 2024, what happened? The left, or what constitutes the left in the United States, not really the left, and the center squabble. We ended up with Trump. If the United States gets fair elections in 2026, 2028, we know what we have to do. We have to do what Canada just did, what Poland, France, and Spain did. We need to unite the left and center to defeat the emerging dictatorship of Trump and the GOP. Will we do it? I hope we have fair elections, and we have no choice but to unite.
Not.
Are we going to start seeing extremely high prices and shortages and empty shelves in the month of May, like we did during the pandemic because of these Trump tariffs? I know I've been seeing all those videos too. Now, I don't predict the future, but what I can share are the facts about this story so you fully understand what's going on and understand the real possibilities that we're all up against in the coming weeks so you can make the best decisions for yourself and your family. And yes, I am going to give you the cargo ship numbers in this video, but first there are 3 things you need to understand about the logistics of tariffs. 1, as I've been reporting since last year, tariffs are not paid for by foreign countries. They are not paid for by China or Mexico. Tariffs are paid for by the American importer who is bringing those foreign goods into the United States. And then, typically, those American importers pass those tariff costs onto you. 2, for lots of items, you do not feel the effects of the tariffs immediately. That's because of how these items get to the United States. For example, imports coming to the United States from China take anywhere between 2 weeks to 40 days to get here on a cargo ship. So let's take this total hypothetical. If a tariff is announced on April 1st on all Chinese imports of 145%, then those tariffs are only going to apply to the Chinese imports that come into the United States and are offloaded to the American importer on April 1st and beyond. They do not impact the Chinese imports that are already stockpiled in the United States. So if there's a cargo ship that leaves China on April 1st, on the longer end of that travel time, the cargo ship will not arrive to the United States until around May 10th. And when that cargo ship docks and all those imports get offloaded, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection is going to go to the American importer who ordered all that stuff and say, okay, you owe the United States government a 145% tariff on the value of all this stuff that you just brought into America. The American importer will pay that 145% tariff on top of the price they paid for the goods, and then we'll take those imports, process them, put them into their inventory, and once they become available for you to purchase after May 10th, that's when you will start to see the price increases. So that's why you're hearing people talk about May. And 3, speaking of those American importers, the confusion about how these tariffs work, how much they are, if they're on or off, is causing a lot of those importers to just say, forget it. I'm not going to place any orders until things calm down, or at least until I know more about whether these tariffs are going to stay in place for the long term. Because why would an American importer place an order from China today when the tariff is 145% if there's a possibility that next week President Trump is going to change his mind and reduce that tariff, right? So if American importers are waiting it out and they're just not placing any orders, then there are fewer imports coming into the United States. And that's why you're hearing about people talking about empty shelves. Now, let's talk about a scenario that is not hypothetical. President Trump's so-called Liberation Day was April 2nd. That was the day he announced those reciprocal tariffs. And then throughout that week and the following week, he escalated the tariffs on China to 145%. So if an American importer were to have placed an order from China around that time, those items would be arriving in the United States anywhere between the week of April 27th and the week of May 4th. Well, we just so happen to have access to the port data for 2 of the biggest ports in the United States. Both are in California, the Port of LA and the Port of Long Beach. And according to their data, we are absolutely seeing fewer cargo ships. The week of April 27th to May 3rd, so this week, we are seeing 31% fewer vessels coming into those ports than we did the week before, and almost 14% fewer vessels than we did last year. Then the week of May 4th to May 10th, next week, we are expecting 13% fewer vessels from the week before and almost 36% fewer vessels than we saw last year. The National Retail Federation says specifically because of these tariffs, this is going to continue for a while. They are expecting 20.5% fewer units coming into ports in the United States in May, with the lowest number of units coming into the port that we've seen in 2 years scheduled for June. The Retail Federation expects a volume drop of 26.6% in June, and then it keeps getting worse throughout the summer. July, imports are expected to be down 27%, and then they're going to be down again in August, almost 27%. Put simply, fewer cargo ships mean fewer imports. That means there are fewer things available for you to buy. And you remember the pandemic, when the supply chain is disrupted and there are fewer things to buy, the prices of those things goes up. This is happening. That cannot be disputed or changed. But what can be changed is the policy on tariffs, or at least a change in the certainty about what's happening with the tariffs. If there is more certainty, businesses can then make decisions about whether they can absorb these tariffs or by how much they're going to have to pass the costs on to you. But remember, even if President Trump says today, forget it, I'm scrapping this entire tariff idea, which is not going to happen, but let's say it does. If he does that and the American importers place an order today, it's going to be about a month before those items get to the United States.
I know when Trump says stuff like this, you guys get scared.
Well, the first time I had two things to do, run the country and survive. I had all these crooked guys. And the second time, I run the country and the world.
But it makes me happy. It makes me feel calm. It makes me feel hope. Because, as I've told you before, cults don't start to break apart till they're in full power. And a lot of you have said, well, why wasn't he in full power in 2016, 2017? He essentially answered that there. There's a different administration here. He has full immunity. He has all these billionaires backing him. He's got the House and Senate, but it's just a different type of administration. He's got all these people from Project 2025. He's got all these yes men around him. So that is why he's in full power. And once you're in full power, you have to deliver. And that started on January 20th. And this man is going fucking scorched earth. And that's good for us. Like, at the rate he's going, the people on the right are if you boil a frog, right, you want it to be warm up. He's just turning it up. And so they can feel that heat. And that heat is either having them move away or hop out, or it's having them feel the need to defend him. And they're trying to say, like, well, yeah, it may not look great now, but we just have to trust the process. But they're very nervous. And when he says things like this, that looks unhinged, and it's so hard to defend. I mean, the only thing they can come up with is he's just trolling people. Well, when the economy's shit and people don't have food and there isn't stuff at the stores, they don't care if he's trolling people. They're pissed off. And it will be very hard for them to defend them, and they will just quietly leave. And you may not hear your relatives or someone say this to you because they're embarrassed, but people leave quietly in cults. That being said, I probably have 1,000 stories from you guys about people that have told you that they're leaving, or they regret their vote, or they're deeply concerned, or they've removed all the flags, or they've turned off Fox News, or, there's tons of stories about this. So it is happening, and we're seeing it in the polls as well. So even if you haven't heard it yourself, it doesn't mean it isn't happening, because I assure you that it is. So you've got your outside group that's basically dropping off. You've got the middle group here. They're the ones that are feeling like they have to defend him, and they don't like that messaging. And that's a pretty large group. Then you're going to have your center core that, they would drink the Kool-Aid with him, and maybe they will. So this is good news. So when he does things like this, I want you to feel calmer, because it hurts them over there. And I believe he's going on a rally tour, and he's going to be saying crazy stuff like that. They are not going to like it, and they are going to back away from it. And they're not really going to have much of a choice, because the economy and everything coming, it's just going to break apart faster and faster. And we are headed towards a tipping point. When that is, I don't know. What it will be exactly, I don't know. But if you know anything about cults, there's definitely that feeling of that tipping point coming. So, cult leaders are unpredictable, but they're predictable at the same time. So it doesn't surprise me he's doing this. It's just that I'm excited he's doing it so fast and so big. It is very good for us.
Good morning, all my radical left lunatic friends. It's April 29th, and here's what has been happening in the corrupt states of America. Amazon is now going to be letting us know how much we are paying for our new tariff taxes. When you go to check out on Amazon, there will be a new line showing you your tariff tax, because yes, tariffs are a tax. KK Caroline is not happy about this, stating this is Amazon being hostile. This is Amazon being transparent, and I hope more companies follow suit. RFK Jr. has decided that Narcan is considered waste because he has cut funding for emergency personnel to carry Narcan. Narcan is a life-saving reversal agent for opioids, and we are absolutely in the middle of an opioid epidemic. And if your reasoning for agreeing with him cutting this money is because insulin costs money, insulin should not cost how much it costs, okay? None of our meds should be costing what they cost. Be mad at Big Pharma. Be mad at the people at the top. Okay, none of it should cost what it is costing. And then we have some exciting news for our friends up north. It looks like Mark Carney is going to be the new Liberal Prime Minister of Canada. And I know Donald Duck loves to take credit for a lot of things, but I don't see him taking credit for this. Because yes, he absolutely did play a big part in this. Because I'm guessing if this election would have been a year ago, that Pierre Poilievre would have won. Because Canada was absolutely starting to jump on the conservative bandwagon. But they have seen what has happened in our country and decided, no thank you. So, good job, Canada. I am so excited for all my Canadian friends right now. While Canada is celebrating this massive win for their country, Donald Duck signed an executive order last night, April 28th, for the DOD and DOJ to find a way to incorporate the military in everyday domestic law enforcement. So they put a time limit for in 90 days, and this absolutely will go through the courts, guys. So it is something that we need to keep an eye on, but this is not something that they are wanting to roll out immediately. It is also being reported that there are over 800 protests being planned for May Day against this current administration. And this should not surprise anybody, given the new ratings that are being reported for Donald Duck's first 100 days. Fox News has even reported that over 50% of this country does not believe that our economy is going in the right direction, and he is losing massive support in his immigration and how he is handling due process. Now, how is the Donald Duck administration handling all these negative reviews? Instead of reflecting on how they are running the country, they have decided they are going to go after journalists. They have stated that they will go after anybody who is reporting negatively on what this administration is doing, even if they are reporting facts. All right, that's enough news updates for right now, so I hope everybody is still able to have a wonderful day.
We have some breaking news. Trump just accused Jeff Bezos, Amazon's founder, of partnering with Chinese propagandizers. Here's what happened. Amazon, yeah, the place where we all shop, floated an idea. Let's show shoppers how much Trump's new China tariffs are raising prices on our platform, because transparency is bad, right? No opinions, no spin, just facts. You buy something for $50, there's a new tariff fee. Now it's $65. That's it. But the Trump's White House, they lost it. The press secretary called it hostile and political. And Donald Trump, he accused Jeff Bezos of partnering with Chinese propaganda just for trying to tell the truth. Why? Because this exposes Trump's lie that he's been repeatedly saying China is paying for the tariffs, not us. No, guys, we are. Every single American shopper is going to be footing the bill for these tariffs. You have to know that. Let's break it down. Tariff on electric vehicles from China jumps from 25% to 100%. Lithium-ion batteries, 25%. Some clothing, shoes, tools, home goods are up to 45%. And some categories, tariffs are hitting as high as 145%. That's not a slap on the wrist for China. That's a tax bomb on the American people. Amazon sellers are raising prices to keep up. The shoppers are feeling it. So when Amazon's even suggesting being honest about it, showing that the tariff surcharge right next to the price, Trump accused them of siding with the enemy. Let's be clear. That's not protecting America. That's gaslighting America. And while Trump screams traitor at Bezos, China is watching. They are running full-blown propaganda right now on TikTok and on Facebook, trying to look like the calm voice of reason. They are saying they support global trade, while Trump is busy torching U.S. businesses and telling the truth. And I believe transparency is not hostile. It's patriotic. We deserve to know why life is more expensive. We deserve a president who tells the truth, not one who punishes anyone who does the truth. The truth is this: Trump's tariffs are hurting working class Americans, and now he's going after the people, trying to show us the receipts. That is not strength, that is censorship. And if we do not speak up, it's only going to get worse. Follow me on Instagram and Substack for the full breakdown.